You felt it this morning. That moment on the stairs when your legs went heavy and you grabbed the handrail, not because you were rushing, not because you were careless, just because something inside your body isn't opening the door the way it used to. Insulin is knocking. It has been knocking for years, and nothing is letting it in. That's not aging. That's not willpower. That's a lock with missing parts. And today I'm going to show you exactly which parts are missing and how to put them back. I'm going to count them down from 3 to 1. And number 1, the mineral that affects literally every single step of how insulin works in your body, is the one that will change everything. Stay with me, because by the time we get there, you'll understand something that most people with diabetes never find out. But first, I need you to feel something for a second. That heaviness in your legs when you climb the second flight of stairs. That moment when you grab the handrail and think, when did this get so hard? You used to take those stairs without a second thought. Now you pause at the bottom, already calculating the effort, already doing the math of how tired you're going to feel at the top. It's not dramatic. It's not a crisis. It's just this low, persistent weight that follows you through the day, and you've quietly started to accept it as the new normal. And that quiet acceptance, that's the part that hurts the most, because somewhere you still remember what it felt like to just move through your own house without thinking about it. The brain fog that rolls in every afternoon around 2 or 3 o'clock, like someone dimmed the lights inside your head. You're sitting in your chair, you've had a reasonable lunch, you did everything right, and still your thoughts slow down, your focus blurs, and the simplest tasks feel like they're happening underwater. You reach for a word, and it's just not there. You read the same sentence twice, and it still doesn't quite land. You drink another cup of coffee. It helps a little, for about 20 minutes, and then the fog comes back, and you're right back where you started. You've probably noticed this yourself. The way the afternoon energy crash doesn't feel like normal tiredness. It feels like something chemical, like your body is rationing fuel, and your brain is the first thing to go offline. That distinction matters, and I'll explain exactly why it happens, and why it's not about what you ate for lunch. Waking up at 2 in the morning for no reason you can name. Your heart isn't racing. Nothing hurts exactly. But something pulled you out of sleep, and now you're lying there in the dark, legs restless, mind turning, counting the hours until the alarm, already dreading the tiredness tomorrow. You already know the answer before you ask the question. You know what you're going to feel like in the morning. And that knowledge is its own kind of exhaustion. The anticipatory weight of it, night after night. The muscle cramps that come out of nowhere, in your calves, in your feet, sometimes so sharp at night they jolt you awake. You stretch, you walk it off. You tell yourself it's nothing. You've learnt to keep the lights off, to shuffle to the bathroom and back without fully waking yourself up, to treat it like an inconvenience instead of a symptom. But it keeps happening. And on some level you know that something is asking for your attention, and you just don't know what. The thirst that doesn't quite go away. The bathroom trips that interrupt your sleep. The dry skin on your shins, that no amount of lotion seems to fix. The slow healing, that small cut on your finger that should have been gone in 3 days, still faintly there a week later. These are not separate problems. They are the same problem wearing different faces. And that problem has a name and a mechanism. And this is the part I need you to hear. It has a solution that most people with diabetes are never told about. And then there's the number on the glucose monitor, the one that doesn't move. You've cut carbs. You've walked every morning, even on the days when your knees ached and the weather was bad, and every sensible part of you wanted to stay in bed. You've measured your portions, taken your medication on schedule, sat through the appointments, nodded along to the advice, and gone home and done exactly what you were told to do consistently, without cheating, without excuses, for months or even years. And still, that fasting number sits there, stubborn as a stone, like it's mocking your effort. Like there's a ceiling you can't break through, no matter how hard you try. That feeling, that specific combination of doing everything right and still not getting results, is the most demoralizing thing I've ever heard people describe. And I've heard it described a lot, in detail, by people who are some of the most disciplined, most motivated, most genuinely committed individuals you could ever meet. They are not failing, and neither are you. You are not imagining this. and it is absolutely not your fault. Here's something that stopped me cold when I first came across it, and I need you to sit with this for a second. In large population studies tracking tens of thousands of people over decades, researchers discovered something that should have changed how we treat diabetes but somehow never made it into the standard 15-minute appointment. People with the best long-term blood sugar control weren't necessarily the ones on the strongest medications or the strictest diets. They weren't the ones with the most willpower or the best genes. They were the ones whose cells had access to 3 specific minerals. Same food, same calories, same prescriptions in some cases, completely different results at the cellular level. I'm going to tell you which 3 minerals those are, but more importantly, I'm going to tell you why your doctor has probably never mentioned them. And that second part is the one that really got under my skin, because the information is not new, it's not obscure, it's been published for decades, so why doesn't anyone know about it? That's the question I kept coming back to, and the answer, when I finally understood it, made me genuinely angry on behalf of every person who has been sitting in an exam room feeling like a failure. I want to be honest with you about who I am, and why I spent weeks going down this particular rabbit hole. I'm not someone who jumps to supplements or alternative theories. I've spent years looking at the research, the real research, not the headlines, and I've learned to be careful about what I share, and even more careful about why. Because I've seen what bad information does to people who are already struggling. I've watched people waste money and time and hope on things that don't work. So when I bring you something, it's because I've done the work, not because it sounds good, because the evidence is there. And the evidence for what I'm about to tell you has been there for a long time. I went through the clinical trials, the population studies from Harvard and the National Institutes of Health. I read the biochemistry, and I mean the actual mechanism, not the marketing language that ends up on supplement labels. I cross-referenced the deficiency data with the population data. I looked at the studies that showed improvement and the ones that didn't, and I tried to understand why the results differed. I spent weeks on this because I needed to understand it for myself before I could explain it to anyone else. And what I found honestly made me frustrated on behalf of every single person who has ever sat in a doctor's office feeling like a failure because their numbers wouldn't move. The information exists. It has been published in peer-reviewed journals. It isn't controversial in the way that, say, some new supplement trend is controversial. It's established biochemistry. It just never made it into the 15-minute appointment. It never made it onto the standard blood test panel. It never became part of the conversation that happens between a person with diabetes and the person responsible for their care. So I decided to bring it here instead, directly to you, because you deserve to understand what's actually happening inside your body. Not just get a prescription adjustment and a pamphlet about carb counting. You deserve the mechanism. You deserve the why. And you deserve to know that the ceiling you've been hitting isn't a character flaw. It's a mineral deficiency. 3 of them, actually, counted down from 3 to 1, because each one builds on the one before it. And number 1 is the one that changes everything. By the time this video ends, you're going to understand the real reason insulin resistance develops and gets worse over time, even in people who are doing everything right. You're going to know which 3 minerals are biochemically required for insulin to do its job at the cellular level. You'll understand why you might be severely deficient in all 3 of them right now through absolutely no fault of your own. And you'll have a concrete starting point, something you can actually do today, not a vague suggestion, a specific action. Before we dive in, if you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds right now, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video, and give this a thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people like you find this content. And drop a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our community is tuning in from around the world. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called the Glucose Paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Before I tell you about the 3 minerals, I want to tell you about Margaret. Margaret is 68 years old, from Tucson, Arizona. She'd been managing type 2 diabetes for 11 years by the time she came across this information. 11 years. That's not a recent diagnosis. She was still adjusting to. That was more than a decade of living with this condition, learning its rhythms, doing the work, showing up every single day for a disease that gave her very little back in return. She was disciplined, genuinely disciplined in a way that most people aren't. She measured her food by weight, not by eye. She walked every morning before the heat of the Arizona day made it impossible. She took her metformin without fail, never skipping, never rationalizing. She kept detailed logs of her numbers. She was, by any reasonable standard, a model patient. Her A1C had barely moved in 3 years. She was exhausted in a way that sleep didn't fix, the kind of deep tiredness that lives in your muscles and behind your eyes and doesn't respond to rest because it isn't caused by a lack of rest. She was sleeping poorly, which made the exhaustion worse. She was getting cramps in her feet almost every night. Sharp, sudden cramps that woke her up and forced her to stand on the cold bathroom tile until they passed. Her doctor told her her labs looked fine. Her doctor told her to keep doing what she was doing. Her doctor, with all the best intentions in the world, had nothing more to offer her. She started with magnesium glycinate. We'll get to exactly why that specific form matters in a few minutes. She added chromium picolinate 2 weeks later, then zinc. She didn't change her diet dramatically. She didn't add a new exercise routine. She added 3 minerals, in the right forms, consistently. Within 6 weeks, the nighttime cramps had almost completely stopped. Not reduced, almost completely stopped. Within 3 months, her fasting glucose had dropped 12 points from her running average. At her 6-month appointment, her doctor reduced her medication dose for the first time in 4 years. She told me she cried in the parking lot afterward. Not because of the medication change, that was almost beside the point. She cried because she finally had proof that she hadn't been failing. The system had been failing her. The information gap had been failing her. And now that gap was closed. That's what this is about. That's exactly where you could be 6 months from now. And it starts with understanding 3 minerals, counted down from 3 to 1, because each one builds on the one before it. And number 1 is the one that changes everything. Let's start with mineral number 3. And it starts with something you might recognize, something you've probably noticed in your hands or feet, especially after a long day or in the quiet of the night. That tingling, that low-level numbness that shows up without warning, like your foot fell asleep, but it didn't. Not exactly. You shake it out, you change position, you elevate your feet, and it fades a little, but it comes back. And every time it does, there's a quiet worry underneath it, because you know that nerve damage and diabetes go together, and you don't know how far along that road you already are. You don't say it out loud, maybe, but it's there, in the back of your mind, every time you feel it. That tingling is a message, and the mineral connected to it is zinc. Most people hear the word zinc and think of cold remedies. Low zinc is at the pharmacy counter. That orange-flavored dissolving tablet, that's the tiny, visible corner of what zinc actually does in the human body. Inside the beta cells of your pancreas, the cells that manufacture insulin, zinc is structurally required for the entire production process. Think of it like the assembly line foreman in a factory. Without the foreman present in adequate numbers, the line slows down. Workers don't know what to do next. The product that comes off the line is structurally compromised. It looks right on the outside but doesn't function the way it should. That product is insulin. Without zinc present in adequate amounts, the insulin your pancreas produces becomes less effective. And over months and years, oxidative damage accumulates. Think of it as rust forming inside the very cells that make your insulin. And that damage accelerates. The cells weaken, output drops, quality drops with it. And you're sitting there doing everything right and wondering why your numbers won't move, while your own insulin factory is running with a skeleton crew and substandard materials. Now, you might be thinking, I eat a balanced diet. I have chicken and vegetables and whole grains. Doesn't that cover my zinc needs? For most people without diabetes, it might. But here's what the research consistently shows. People who have been living with elevated blood sugar for a significant period of time are dramatically more likely to be zinc deficient, not mildly low, severely deficient. The mechanism is the same one we'll come back to again and again today. Elevated blood sugar forces the kidneys to work overtime, and minerals get flushed out along with the excess glucose. So the very condition that makes you need more zinc is also the condition that's depleting it fastest. You can't eat your way out of that cycle without knowing it's happening, and almost nobody tests for it. It isn't part of the standard diabetes protocol. It doesn't show up on the lab panel your doctor orders at your annual appointment. So the deficiency runs in the background, quietly undermining everything you're doing, completely invisible to the people who are supposed to be monitoring your health. That changes everything about how you think about this. Zinc gluconate is the form that absorbs well and tends to be gentle on the stomach. Important because if a supplement causes nausea, you'll stop taking it. And consistency is everything here. 15 to 30 milligrams daily, taken with food, maintained over weeks and months. Not in huge doses, not sporadically when you remember consistently every day, because you're restoring a structural deficiency, not treating an acute symptom. And when zinc is in place, it sets the foundation for mineral number 2, because the next mineral needs a functioning factory to work with. That's number 3. Now we move to number 2. Think about something else you might recognize. That craving that hits in the late afternoon, almost like a compulsion, the reach towards something sweet, something starchy, something dense with quick energy. You're not hungry, not exactly. You ate a reasonable lunch, but your body is screaming for something, and the signal is so strong that ignoring it feels almost physical, like pressing against a current. You tell yourself it's willpower. You've been telling yourself that for years, but it isn't. Chromium deficiency. That's mineral number 2. Here's how I'd explain what chromium actually does. Because when I first understood this mechanism, it genuinely reframed everything I thought I knew about insulin resistance. Imagine you have a speaker system, a good one, well-maintained, with a clean signal coming in, but the volume knob is stuck at about 30%. The music is playing, the signal is there, traveling through all the right channels. But nobody in the room can quite hear it clearly, so they keep asking you to repeat yourself, and the conversation never quite lands the way it should. People get frustrated, they raise their voices, everyone's working harder than they should have to, and nothing is flowing. That's what happens at your insulin receptor when chromium is low. Insulin arrives, your pancreas made it, it traveled through your bloodstream, it found the receptor on the surface of your cell, it binds, exactly the way it's supposed to. But the signal it sends, the message that's supposed to open the internal door and let glucose inside where it can actually be used for energy, comes through at 30% volume. The cell doesn't respond properly. It hears something, but not clearly enough to act. Glucose stays in your bloodstream. Your brain interprets elevated blood sugar as a starvation signal because your cells aren't getting fed even though the glucose is right there, and it tells you to eat more carbohydrates specifically. Your post-meal spikes get bigger and last longer. Your glucose tolerance, your body's ability to handle a normal amount of carbohydrates without your blood sugar going haywire, worsens gradually, quietly, over months and years. If that sounds familiar, if you've noticed that your tolerance for carbohydrates seems to have gotten worse over time, that foods you used to eat without issue now spike you dramatically, that is not your imagination, and it is not inevitable. It's a chromium story. Now you might be thinking, I take a multivitamin every day. Doesn't that cover it? The short answer is almost certainly no. And here's why that matters. Most multivitamins use forms of these minerals that your body absorbs at rates as low as 2 to 4%. The number on the label looks reassuring. It says 100% of your daily value, and you take it every morning and feel like you've covered your bases. But your cells are getting almost nothing from it. The form matters more than the dose. Chromium picolinate is the specific form used in the clinical trials that showed real improvements in insulin receptor sensitivity and gradual A1C reduction. Chromium chloride, the cheap form in most multivitamins, absorbs at a fraction of the rate. That distinction is not optional nuance. It's the difference between something that works and something that doesn't. Chromium works slowly. That's not a flaw. That's the biology of receptor restoration. You're not forcing a dramatic reaction in your bloodstream. You're patiently rebuilding the sensitivity of receptors that have been underperforming for years. The way you'd slowly restore a stiff joint through careful, consistent movement rather than forcing it. 200 to 400 micrograms daily, with meals, because chromium acts directly on post-meal blood sugar dynamics. Give it months, not days. The people who quit after 2 weeks because they don't feel anything yet are the ones who never find out what this can do. You're not broken, your signal is just too quiet. Chromium turns the volume back up. That's number 2. Now we're about halfway through, and before I tell you about number 1, I want to come back to something I mentioned at the very beginning. Remember the question I raised at the start. Why do people with identical diets, identical calorie counts, even identical medications, get completely different blood sugar outcomes? You now have 2 pieces of the answer. Zinc, which determines whether your pancreas can manufacture quality insulin in the first place. Chromium, which determines whether your cells can hear the signal when insulin arrives. But there's a third layer, one that sits underneath both of them, that affects literally every single step of the entire cascade. And this is the layer that I kept coming back to in the research, again and again, because the scope of it surprised me even after everything else I'd read. Here's the second question I want you to sit with until we get there. If this mineral is so critical, if the research has been clear about it for decades, why do standard blood tests consistently miss the deficiency? Why do people come back with normal lab results and still be severely deficient? The answer to that question is one of the most important things you'll learn today, and it's coming up in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you about Robert. Robert is 72 years old, from Portland, Oregon, retired electrician. He spent his career thinking in systems, circuits, loads, pathways, the logic of how current moves through a structure. He was the kind of person who, when his doctor explained something, needed to understand the mechanism before he'd accept the advice. Not because he was difficult, because he was thorough, because he'd spent 40 years knowing that if you don't understand why something works, you can't troubleshoot it when it stops working. He'd been skeptical of supplements for years. Reasonably so, he would tell you. He'd seen too many products make too many promises. What convinced him wasn't enthusiasm. It wasn't a testimonial. It was the mechanism. Once he understood exactly why insulin resistance worsens without these minerals, the receptor signaling, the cascade, the flushing cycle we're about to talk about, it clicked for him, the way an electrical diagram clicks. He understood the circuitry. He could see the missing connections. He started with magnesium glycinate, number 1 on our countdown, and stayed consistent for 4 months before he evaluated the results. His sleep improved within 10 days, which he hadn't expected. He'd been attributing his poor sleep to stress and age for 5 years. Within a month, the afternoon brain fog that had become his constant companion, the one he'd been quietly assuming was just what getting older felt like, lifted significantly. At month 4, his A1C dropped from 7.8 to 7.2. Small numbers on paper, an enormous difference in how he felt every single day. He told me he'd gotten himself back. The mineral that made the biggest difference for Robert is the same one we're about to talk about now. Number 1. Let me ask you something directly. When did you last sleep through the entire night without waking up? Not years ago in memory. Recently. Last week. Last month. If you're lying there at 2 or 3 in the morning, legs restless, mind running, unable to get back into deep sleep, that is not just bad luck, and it is not just getting older. That is a physiological signal. Your body is running critically low on the most important mineral in this entire conversation, magnesium. That's number 1. I spent more time on magnesium than anything else when I was going through the research, because the scope of what it does inside the body is genuinely staggering. Think of magnesium as the electrical grid that powers a city. You might have working buildings, functioning roads, capable workers, but without the power grid operating at full capacity, nothing runs properly. The buildings are dark, the equipment sits idle, the workers show up but can't do their jobs. That's what happens inside your cells when magnesium is low. Every system is technically present. Nothing works the way it should. Magnesium isn't involved in one or two steps of insulin signaling. It's required for literally every single step of the cascade. When insulin arrives at the receptor and binds, magnesium must be present for that binding event to trigger the internal signaling sequence. When that sequence is supposed to activate the machinery inside the cell, magnesium must be present as a cofactor. When glucose transport proteins are supposed to move to the cell membrane and open the door for glucose to cross from outside to inside, magnesium must be present. And when glucose finally makes it inside the cell and needs to be converted to usable energy through a process called glycolysis, magnesium must be present for every enzymatic step of that conversion. Without enough magnesium, insulin resistance doesn't just stay where it is. It worsens, steadily, progressively, regardless of what else you do. Your fasting glucose creeps upward. Your A1C stalls. Your medication doses go up. And nobody asks why. Because the standard blood test for magnesium, the serum test your doctor orders, is notoriously unreliable. And this is the answer to the question I asked you a few minutes ago. Here's why the tails misses it. Your body is brilliant at survival. It will actively pull magnesium out of your cells, out of your bones, out of your muscles, depleting those stores dramatically in order to keep your blood levels looking normal. Because magnesium in the blood is so critical for heart function and nerve function that your body treats blood levels as non-negotiable. So the serum test comes back normal or near normal. Everything looks fine. Your cells are starving. The deficiency is severe and has been building for years. And nobody connects the dots because the test everyone uses is measuring the wrong compartment. You're not imagining it. It's real and it's fixable. Here's what makes magnesium deficiency so widespread among people with diabetes that it almost defies belief. Chronically elevated blood sugar forces your kidneys to work overtime, filtering excess glucose from your bloodstream. Magnesium, along with other electrolytes, gets flushed out right along with that excess sugar. So high blood sugar depletes magnesium. Low magnesium worsens insulin resistance because every step of insulin signaling is compromised. Worsening insulin resistance raises blood sugar higher. Higher blood sugar depletes more magnesium. A vicious cycle that runs silently in the background for years, sometimes decades, while everyone focuses on carb counts and medication doses and the number on the scale. And then there's stress. Chronic stress burns through magnesium faster than almost anything else your body does. Your adrenal glands release cortisol when you're under sustained pressure, and cortisol requires magnesium to be metabolized and cleared from your system. If you're carrying the weight of health anxiety, financial pressure, family caregiving, chronic pain management, and who among us isn't carrying at least some of that, you are actively draining your magnesium reserves every single day. Not metaphorically, biochemically. The stress response is real, and it costs real nutrients. Now you might be thinking, okay, but I eat spinach. I eat almonds. I eat the foods that are supposed to be high in magnesium. Doesn't that take care of it? This is the part that made me genuinely angry when I found it. And I want you to understand why. Modern industrial farming over the last 50 to 70 years has systematically stripped minerals from agricultural soil through practices that prioritize yield over nutrient density. The spinach you buy today, the broccoli, the whole grains, the foods you've been eating because you were told they were healthy and nutritious, contain measurably, scientifically documented lower mineral content than the same vegetables grown 50 years ago. Some studies show magnesium content in common vegetables has declined by 30 to 40%. Same food, less nutrition. It is a systemic failure, not a personal one. You cannot out-eat a depleted food supply with willpower. This is why food alone often cannot correct existing deficiencies once blood sugar has been elevated for years. The depletion cycle is too fast, the food supply too compromised, the body's demand too high. You need targeted supplementation, not as a replacement for eating well, but as a focused intervention to restore what's been systematically lost through no action of your own. Magnesium glycinate is the form the research points to consistently well absorbed by the body, gentle on the digestive system, and unlike magnesium oxide, which is the cheap form used in most bargain supplements, it actually raises cellular magnesium levels meaningfully. Magnesium oxide is mostly used as a laxative. It works very well at that, at raising your actual cellular magnesium. Almost nothing, 300 to 400 milligrams daily of magnesium glycinate, ideally split between morning and evening. Many people find the evening dose particularly useful, taken 30 minutes before bed, because one of the first and most noticeable effects of correcting magnesium deficiency is improved sleep quality, which brings me to what people actually experience when they start getting this right, because the sequence matters, and it's different from what most people expect. The first thing most people notice is not a change in blood sugar numbers. It's sleep. They fall asleep more easily. They stay asleep longer. The restless legs quiet down. They wake up in the morning feeling like they actually rested. And if you've been waking up exhausted for years, that first morning when you realize you slept through the night is something you remember. Within a few weeks of consistent use, fasting glucose readings start trending downward, not dramatically at first, but the trend is there, and trends matter more than single data points. Post-meal spikes get smaller and resolve faster. Within 2 to 3 months of consistent use across all 3 minerals, the A1C starts to shift. And the overall sense of being at war with your own body, that low-level, constant friction between your intentions and your results, begins to ease. You start feeling more like yourself again, and that matters just as much as the numbers, maybe more. Now let me tell you about Dorothy, because her story is the one I keep coming back to, the one I want to close this video with. Dorothy is 65 years old, from Birmingham, Alabama. She'd given up, if she's honest about it. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. She hadn't stopped taking her medication or skipped her appointments. She'd just quietly, gradually, stopped believing that anything was actually going to change. She was doing the things she was supposed to do, taking her insulin, checking her numbers, going to the appointments, nodding along to the advice, and the numbers just sat there. The heavy legs, the foggy afternoons that stole 2 or 3 hours from every single day, the sleep that never left her feeling rested, no matter how many hours she got, the cramps that jolted her awake and forced her to stand on the bathroom tile in the dark, half asleep, waiting for her calf to release. She'd been living with this for 8 years. At some point, 8 years in, you stop expecting it to change. You just manage it. When someone she trusted told her about magnesium specifically, not supplements in general, but magnesium glycinate, that specific form, and that specific dose, she tried it more out of respect for that person than out of any real expectation. She told me later she thought she was humoring them. She took it before bed for a week, and nothing dramatic happened, and she almost stopped. But she kept going, because she'd said she would. The sleep change came first. That startled her, because it wasn't what she was looking for, and it wasn't what she'd been promised. She just woke up one morning and realized she'd slept through the night. Then it happened again. The restless legs, which she'd been managing with a prescription for years, quieted down to a degree she hadn't thought possible. The cramps stopped. Then she added chromium, and within a month she noticed that the afternoon fog wasn't arriving with its usual ferocity. Some afternoons it didn't arrive at all. Then she added zinc, and 3 months in, her fasting numbers started inching down, 5 points, then 8, then 12 over the course of another month. At her next appointment, her doctor noticed the trend and asked what had changed. Dorothy told her. The doctor was skeptical, but the numbers were the numbers. What Dorothy told me, and I've thought about this sentence more than almost anything else I've encountered in years of doing this work, was this: I stopped feeling like my body was the enemy. That sentence, 7 words, I stopped feeling like my body was the enemy, because that's what 8 years of doing everything right and getting nowhere does to you. It makes you feel like your own body is working against you. Like you're in a fight. You can't win, no matter how hard you try. And the discovery that the fight was never the problem, that the missing pieces were always there, waiting to be found, changes something at a level that goes much deeper than blood sugar numbers. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, but I've tried supplements before. I bought a bottle, I took them for a couple of weeks, I felt nothing, and I put the bottle in the back of the cabinet and forgot about it. That's the most common reason this fails. And it fails not because the minerals don't work. It's because 2 weeks is nowhere near enough time for biological repair to become visible. You're not triggering a pharmaceutical reaction. You're not forcing a rapid change in your bloodstream chemistry. You're slowly, patiently restoring cellular infrastructure that degraded over years, sometimes over decades. That takes months. 3 to 6 months of consistent daily use before you have enough information to evaluate whether it's working. The people who see the results are the ones who treat it like a long game, because that's what it is. The other reason it fails is form. Magnesium oxide, cheap chromium chloride, low bioavailability zinc. These are what most bargain supplements and most multivitamins contain. Your body absorbs almost none of it. The label looks impressive. Your cells get nothing. Magnesium glycinate, chromium picolinate, zinc gluconate. These are the specific forms the research used. This is not a minor detail. It's the entire difference between something that works and something that doesn't. And please work with your doctor as your blood sugar improves. This is genuinely important. As your cells start responding better to insulin, your medication needs may change. That's a good problem to have, arguably the best problem you can have. But it needs to be managed carefully, because blood sugar dropping while you're on full medication doses can cause dangerous lows. Regular monitoring, honest conversations with your provider, adjusted doses under medical supervision. That's how this goes well for everybody. Think back to how you felt at the beginning of this video. Not this morning, the specific moment at the beginning of this video, when I described that moment on the stairs, the heaviness in your legs, your hand on the handrail, the quiet calculation of the effort required. That was the starting point. And I want you to feel, right now, how different that starting point looks from where you're standing now. You know things now that you didn't know 30 minutes ago. Not vague things, not general things, specific, mechanistic, biochemically grounded things that explain what has been happening in your body, possibly for years, in complete silence. Your cells are not broken. They are not permanently insulin resistant beyond any possibility of repair. They are deficient, specifically and correctively deficient in 3 minerals that your body needs to make insulin work the way it's supposed to. Zinc, which your beta cells need as a structural component of the insulin production process itself. Without it, the factory runs on a skeleton crew, and the product that comes off the line is compromised before it ever reaches your cells. Chromium, which your insulin receptors need to transmit the signal at full volume, so that when insulin arrives and binds, the message actually gets through, the door actually opens, and glucose actually enters the cell where it can be used for energy, rather than sitting in your bloodstream building damage. And magnesium, the electrical grid beneath everything else, which every single enzymatic step of insulin signaling depends on, which your kidneys have been quietly flushing away every time your blood sugar ran high, which your adrenal glands have been burning through every time you are under stress, which the soil your food was grown in was slowly depleted of over decades before you ever started trying to eat healthy. Your cells became deficient through forces that had nothing to do with your discipline, your choices, or your character. High blood sugar depletes magnesium, which worsens insulin resistance, which raises blood sugar higher, which depletes more magnesium. Industrial soil depletion reduced the mineral content of the food supply before most of us were paying attention. Standard lab tests measure the wrong compartment and return normal results while the actual deficiency runs deeper, undetected for years. And the 15-minute appointment wasn't designed to catch any of it. This is mechanical, not moral, biology, not character. And knowing that, really knowing it, feeling it settle into place is itself a kind of repair. Because the story you've been telling yourself that you're failing, that you're not trying hard enough, that your body is simply too far gone, that story was never true. It was an explanation built on incomplete information. And you have better information now. 6 months from now, if you start today with magnesium glycinate first, consistently, morning and evening, then chromium picolinate with meals, then zinc gluconate, you could be sleeping through the night. You could be waking up feeling like you actually rested for the first time in years. You could have energy in the afternoon that doesn't collapse into fog at 2 o'clock. You could be watching your fasting numbers trend downward for the first time in memory, 5 points, then 8, then 12. The same trajectory Margaret followed, the same Robert followed. You could be sitting in your doctor's office, hearing that your medication dose is being reviewed downward, and walking out to your car, and maybe sitting there for a moment before you start the engine. And maybe, like Dorothy, you'll feel it, not just in the numbers, but in something deeper, in the relationship between you and your own body, the one that has felt like a fight for so long, the one where no matter how much effort you brought, the results never seemed to match it. That fight was never yours to lose. The pieces were just missing, and now you know what they are. I stopped feeling like my body was the enemy. That's what Dorothy said. That's what's available to you, starting today. And hey, if you made it all the way here, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button to let me know this was worth your time. And leave a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. Seriously, I read every single one, and it means a lot to see how far this community reaches. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar? Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called The Glucose Paradox, and inside, you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free. You can download it in a second, and it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.